Well, welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Dr. Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and today my guests are Steve Minkler, who's the academic dean here at Middlesex. I think you've been on the program, even hosted this program.
I have a couple times, yes.
And Kristen Inglis, who is the academic manager for the Center for Prison Education at Wesleyan. And what we're going to be talking about today is the collaboration we've embarked upon this fall semester, 2016, working together to educate people who are incarcerated at Cheshire and York. So in the first part of the program, we thought, well, let's just describe what it is we're doing, and then we've got lots of other things we can talk about.
Great. So this partnership between Wesleyan and Middlesex Community College is a development of a program that the Wesleyan Center for Prison Education has been operating since 2009. And what the program does is bring faculty into two local Connecticut correctional institutions, Cheshire Correctional and York Correctional, and teaches high caliber liberal arts college classes to incarcerated men and women there. Since 2009, we have had more than 100 people go through the program. Currently, we have about 50 enrolled. And the students get, college credit for their courses. And with this partnership between Wesleyan and Middlesex, for the very first time, the students are able to work towards an associate's degree in general studies from Middlesex, which is really, really fantastic and something the students are over the moon about.
It's nice that they're over the moon. I mean, they're working toward a bachelor's degree at Wesleyan, so it's a milestone. So it's something that they can accomplish. It's half the amount of credits.
We don't yet have a bachelor's program in place for the program, and part of that is a curricular challenge of figuring out amongst ourselves how, for example, we would do a college major. So, for a bachelor's degree, you generally have a traditional major. We tend to offer at Cheshire in any given semester about 6 courses. And so, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to accumulate the number of, say, Russian courses you would need to get a Russian major. And so one of the things we're doing as a program right now is trying to figure out that curricular challenge and see what kinds of majors might be options for our students so that a BA option would be possible.
And we chose the general studies degree as the basis for this program because students are actually taking a mix of courses that are Wesleyan transcripted, that are taught by Wesleyan professors and run by Wesleyan, and courses that are taught by Middlesex professors that are transcripted under Middlesex Community College. So basically a student would be transferring their Wesleyan courses to Middlesex, even though it's all one program, to then accumulate the credits for general studies. General studies we chose because it's very open and flexible. So they could take a Russian class, for example, that would apply to a general studies degree where it might not apply to a business degree. So I think this also sets the students up because they will have a mix of credits from both institutions that once they get their associate's degree, they could conceivably transfer to Wesleyan or any other four-year school, and they could also possibly take advantage of some of the transfer agreements that Middlesex has with other state universities in Connecticut.
So you've been doing this long enough that certainly some of the individuals you've educated have been released from prison. So what do they do when they get out of prison as a result of having an education?
All kinds of things, real diversity, and part of that reflects the diversity of our students. So community colleges are used to having a real diversity in student body in terms of age, in terms of background, in terms of family status. And the same is true for the students in our program. We have students as young as 17, as old as 53, and coming from all walks of life. Some are mothers, some are fathers, some are aunts and uncles, some have no children at all. And so what our students go on to do, depends in large part on their life situation, whether they're responsible for supporting a family, whether they're young and are able to go to a 4-year institution full-time. We've really had everything. Our students who have finished with the program have gone on to 4-year institutions like Central Connecticut State, Wesleyan University, the New School of Social Research in New York City. We've also had a number of students go to community colleges to continue to take courses while they're working and to make progress on what they hope will eventually be a 4-year degree. So we have students at Gateway Community College, we have students at Capital Community College, and so there's a real variety reflecting, all different kinds of personal, professional, and academic goals. And we really work with the students to try to find what works best for their particular situation.
It sounds like a really intriguing program. So when we come back after the break, we'll talk some more about what it's actually like to live, you get to live along with us. You've been there at least now a year. Well, we're back. It's Middlesex Moments Radio Show. I'm Anna Wesession. My guests today are Steve Minkler, the academic dean here at Middlesex, and Kristen Inglis, who's the academic manager at the Center for Prison Education at Wesleyan University. We're talking about this amazing partnership that we've embarked upon this fall semester. But Kristen's been working in this program for about a year. So when you think back on what you learned and what surprised you, what changed the way you saw the world this past year working in this program?
That's a hard question. Before taking this position with the Center for Prison Education, I was a philosophy professor at the University of Pittsburgh.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
It was a great job. I liked it very much, but it was actually an experience teaching in prison that made me really want to leave my post and devote myself full time to help building college and prison programs like the one that Wesleyan and Middlesex are embarked on. The academy is a very special place, but it's also a place that can be very solipsistic. It's a place where professors spend a lot of time in the ivory tower creating research and talking amongst each other, but there's not always that much engagement with the community, or not as much engagement with the community or wider public than I would like. And so one of the things about this position that I've really loved but also had to learn a lot about is bringing academics outside of that really narrow space and into communities that play by different rules, something like Department of Corrections, and taking academic material into spaces where it's really appreciated but also very new. So this is communities where by and large the students are first generation college students. Many of the students got their GED in prison. And so there are a lot of assumptions that I think academics just tend to make, like, well, of course this is worth reading, or of course this is the way that an academic essay is written. But I do think that going into a brand new space challenges some of those assumptions and makes us rethink what the point of a particular curriculum is, or what the point of a certain assignment structure is. So I've learned a lot just about how solipsistic higher education can be, especially at these particularly elite institutions. And I've also just learned a lot about the criminal justice system and Department of Corrections. It's a very controlled space, understandably, and so learning a lot about how to take what is usually a pretty free space, that of higher education, and making it work in a really controlled space has been a real learning experience.
You were going to say something. I'm looking at Steve Minkler. On the radio, it's hard to know what I'm doing, but I'm looking at you.
Right. Well, I think I just wanted to echo some of Kristen's comments, although I've not yet visited the two institutions that we're working with. Kristen and I and our financial aid director, Irene Martin, went to a conference this summer in Washington, D.C. about these programs throughout the country. And I think what really inspired me were actually meeting students who were in programs in other parts of the country who talked about how life-changing this experience was for them. And that did kind of wash away a mental image I had in my own mind about who these students were. And they are students. They happen to be in a prison, but they are students, and they take this opportunity very seriously. And what really struck me was one of the students talked about how he felt his role while in prison in a program like this was to change the culture of the prison, to make it known that you are better than who society thinks you are, and only through education will you be empowered to live out that part of your life. And he really felt that he was making strides in his program to do that kind of thing, and that really inspired me. And I'm sure Kristen has seen that with the students that she's worked with in our program that I've yet to meet. It's just remarkable. And the other thing that kind of impressed me too, hearing from this student, was that because it is a controlled environment, unlike a typical college campus, he said that, and it's even controlled to the point where they do not have mobile devices, computers, and he said, we sit there old school with pencils, paper, and books, and we are waiting for you to teach us. And so in some ways it kind of challenges some of our faculty who traditionally think, turn the phones off, I don't want this, I don't want this. Well, here's an opportunity to kind of do it the old-fashioned way, but with students who are eager from the first moment to be in that classroom. They will be there every class period, barring some unforeseen circumstances, but they're there and they know what this means in a way that you don't always see every day with a typical college student.
There are so many things. So first of all, that I'd like to dig into, give us a 10 to 15 word definition of solipsistic. Let me just...
I think that in at least certain parts of academia, there's a frame of mind where what is important is that you are sort of producing scholarship, you are adding to the overall body of knowledge, and less a concern with how that knowledge is used or how that knowledge is utilized or how that knowledge can have practical benefits for society. And so one of the things that I think College and Prison really challenges us to do is to see the university as a resource, one that can be used for the social good, and that really again challenges us to think about how can we use these resources to enrich other communities, how can we use these resources to educate people who might not otherwise get an education. And so it's sort of taking the emphasis from sort of this ivory tower where the focus is really on producing scholarship for knowledge's own sake, to thinking about university as a vessel for resources that can be used for the public good.
Yeah, thank you. Although that was way more than 10 to 15 as you were talking, I was thinking about the Wisconsin idea, which was very early in the 20th century, and it was promoted by the progressives who lived in Wisconsin, who believed that the reach of the university should be the boundaries of the state, and that the impact of the university should be felt in every home in the state of Wisconsin. And they also felt strongly that people in the academic sphere should consult on legislation that was being developed and then ultimately passed, and regulating the society in which they were living, and that they should be producing people who could become legislators, who were statesmen. So there's a whole lot of really broad thinking that was going on very early in the 20th century. And I think, community colleges, I think to some degree are an outgrowth of that thinking, that everyone can benefit. Society will benefit collectively if you have more people who are educated, more productive in the economy, more willing to pay taxes and contribute to the common good. And that that in itself would be a way to sustain democracy. I mean, at the root of it is, this was a great idea in the 1700s, but now at that time it was the early 1900s. How are we going to keep those flames fanned? And I think we have the same issues confronting us today. So let me ask you, as a philosopher, now my whole paradigm for you, Kristen, has changed, about what you see as the sort of critical moral problems that our society faces because we have so much of our population incarcerated. That population does tend demographically to be kind of identified as low income, low socioeconomic standing minority populations. Although, even though this program may be repeated at a later date, I have to remind our listeners that today Governor Rowland, maybe yesterday, reported for prison. So, that certainly blows the stereotype of this is only people of color, only people who have low incomes, low levels of education. I mean, it can be visited across the entire spectrum. But what do you see as the critical moral problems?
I mean, there are a number of problems. I think that certainly it's a real problem that there is just a shocking racial and economic status disparity if you look at the statistics on who is incarcerated. One of the more shocking things for me going into prison for the first time is to go into a space where it is unusual to find someone who looks like me, somebody who is white, and that's sort of very dramatic, visceral feeling to just see the sort of racial disparity that characterizes our prisons. I think for me, besides that, I think that if we're just looking at this from a sort of social perspective, we have in prison, 2.2 million individuals. We are spending an exorbitant amount of money to actually incarcerate these individuals. And it forces us to confront the question, what do we want to do with this time that these individuals are serving and with the resources that we are putting into this institution? And it seems to me that as a society, we should be trying to use those resources to educate these individuals, to supply the mental health care and health care that these individuals need. By and large, incarcerated men and women come from communities that have very little resources to begin with, and so this is, an opportunity to try to bring some of those resources back in ways that enable and empower them to contribute to their communities when they are released from prison. So I see this as, a question about what we as society want for 2.2 million of our fellow citizens. Do we want for these 2.2 million citizens the opportunity for them to go on and achieve their professional, personal, and academic goals and in turn contribute to the flourishing of our society as a whole? Or do we want to marginalize them and render it harder and harder for them to be contributing members of the culture?
We'll talk about that some more when we come back right after this message. Well, welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show, third segment of the program. We're talking today with Steve Minkler, who's the dean here at the college, and Kristen Inglis, who's the academic manager at Wesleyan University for the Center for Prison Education. So as we were talking over the break, I was asking about the terms that we use for incarcerated individuals and the institutions into which we place them for periods of time, sentences, and so we call it corrections. Department of Corrections, we call it reformatory, but there's something of a conflict between that and the idea of punishment. So, Kristen, you were starting to talk about, is it a contradiction or is it something that's really a fluid concept and one flows into the other?
Yeah, it's a great question. We do call prisons correctional institutions. That's their official title. And so presumably what we are purporting to do in these facilities is correct people if they were engaging in socially harmful behaviors pre-incarceration. We are supposed to be educating them or providing therapies or opportunities for them to reform and leave prison so that they are acting in pro-social ways. I think that the path for correction includes opportunities for prisoners to reflect on the crimes that they have committed and the harms that they have inflicted on their communities or others. I think, oftentimes what motivates people to change is coming to terms with the ways in which their behaviors have hurt themselves and hurt others. I think that there are ways that the prison can both punish prisoners in the form of depriving them of certain freedoms that force a certain kind of reflection and a certain kind of acceptance that one has done something that the state has deemed unacceptable, while at the same time creating opportunities for people to, once they've made that realization, to get an education or learn better methods of anger management or learn certain vocational skills that will enable them to use their time productively. So I don't actually think that there's a tension. I think that unfortunately today corrections doesn't have as much of an emphasis on corrections as I would like, and I think more and more when we see things like the Second Chance Act and we see more college and prison programs coming into prisons, that's a reflection of the public's understanding that we really do need to take the corrections part of incarceration more seriously.
I think there's so many skills that college imparts to people. At least I certainly hope that it does. And high on my list is always critical thinking. But reflection is a skill too. And you were just talking about reflection. So Steve, what kinds of courses are we offering there? And will we give people the opportunity to develop reflective skills?
Oh, absolutely. I think, certainly some of the courses that we offer are what you might call your bread and butter general education courses for a program like this that leads to a general studies degree. But we do offer courses in the fine arts and philosophy, international relations, political systems, certainly courses that talk about the criminal justice system so that these students obviously are familiar with that system from their experience. But now let's look at how it's applied societally, sort of as Kristen was referring to. So I think there are many opportunities for students to reflect on their own personal experience, but also how to relate that to the wider world and to set them up for success after they are released and after they are done with their educational experience. I think one of the unique aspects of this program, at least in New England, is that it is on a liberal arts basis. So as we've talked about in this program, that this is a general studies degree program, as opposed to other colleges who've selected what we might traditionally call a vocational program, direct employable skills in a specific field. So I think the philosophy behind the Center for Prison Education and the Middlesex Wesleyan partnership is that a liberal arts education is itself employable skills, but you are teaching students to think critically and to have a broad array of preparation for success in any field that they so choose. So again, I think it's a great opportunity for students to get that base and then continue an education beyond that in something that's more specific in their area of interest.
Sure. I mean, everybody's got to get some kinds of learning to teach philosophy at the college level is a vocational skill.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Or be an academic dean.
Yeah.
And there's no book
There's
for that.
I
wish there was a book.
I missed that class.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I'm curious, as Steve is talking about this, Kristen, because you've been doing this. You've only been there a year, but since 2009, Wesleyan's been doing this. Has there been any impact or change in culture among the resident Wesleyan students who never go to the prison? I think there are some who actually do volunteer, right?
Yeah.
But what is the doorway between the Wesleyan experience for the 3,000 students there and the 50 or so in these two different prison programs?
So that's a great question. As you mentioned, we do have a number of students each semester who go into the facilities and serve as tutors or teaching assistants. They go in once a week during what are called study halls, and those are opportunities for incarcerated students to work on papers or get extra help with math or biology. And during that time, the Wesleyan undergrads are there to serve as academic resources. So certainly on those students, there's a tremendous impact, and it's actually mind-boggling for me to learn about all of the things that these volunteers have gone on to do after graduation in terms of going to law school, getting involved in reentry work or social services. That many of our volunteers say that their volunteer experience with the Center for Prison Education was by far the most influential program that they participated in while at Wesleyan, and went on to change their professional trajectory. But even for those who are not actually going in as volunteers, there are still other ways for them to connect with incarcerated students indirectly. So for example, a number of times we've had professors teach the same college course, both on the Wesleyan main campus and at Cheshire and at York. And so what these professors have done is facilitated programs where the students on the main campus can read the papers of the students at Cheshire or York and vice versa, so that there's a kind of community to see what others are talking about. This is what I took away from The Invisible Man. What did you take away from The Invisible Man? And so that's a way that you can create a learning community that goes beyond sort of the traditional campus walls. And so that's something that we would love to continue to promote, because it really does expand the campus community in ways that makes the whole institution better and smarter.
I think, I'm really impressed by that idea. And as you were talking, I was wondering about how the faculty members also have to kind of make sense of this, right? Make meaning of it. But what a great idea to be able to share the work, which are reflective essays, I assume, and in the example of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, like what would your perspective be on that? Because everybody takes just their own bite of the apple as they come at a piece of literature, and you can learn from seeing things from the world from other people's perspectives, which is sort of, to some degree, the point of college.
Right. Well, I think it also opens the door for more collaboration between Middlesex and Wesleyan. This is fantastic, and it's a great way for us to partner in a very meaningful program. But we're a couple miles away from each other. So to the extent that we offer the same classes at both institutions, I think it does open up this whole idea of a learning community between Wesleyan and Middlesex to do things, as we were just saying, sharing papers or sharing perspectives on different topics that are being taught, and perhaps even inviting someday the idea of cross-teaching or co-teaching courses that benefit certainly students in the prison systems, but also traditional students on our campuses. So we're really excited about doing more with Wesleyan in a way that serves, yes, this particular Center for Prison Education, but the wider community too.
Well, before we close the program today, I thought we should talk briefly about how we're financing this program. And the one thing that is new this year is that there's a re-entry into the little universe of education in the prison setting of the Pell Funds, which are grants in aid. They're federal money that is given to people who have financial need so that they can pursue a college education. That was suspended in 1994, but now it's been reinstituted. And Middlesex Community College is one of, I think, 67 institutions across the country. But Wesleyan also has been raising money privately for all these many years. What would it be, 8 years?
That's right. So to date, Wesleyan has not taken any public funds to run its courses. And I should also say that none of its funds have come from tuition dollars. So none of our money comes from Wesleyan itself. Instead, our entire operating budget to date has come from fundraising from individuals and foundations who want to bring more college to prisons. As President Wasesha was just saying, just now, for the first time since 1994, Congress is bringing back Pell Grants to incarcerated students on a limited basis. It's part of an executive experiment that has a time frame of 3 years. The purpose of the experiment is to see what happens with recidivism rates if incarcerated men and women are given Pell Grants to take college courses. And the idea is that if Pell Grants do help reduce recidivism, then maybe there will be a political will in the future to reinstate Pell Grants for prisoners permanently.
So we'll have to see. We'll have to check back in with each other on a whole bunch of different elements of this program. But one is what in 3 years, what will we be able to see when we turn around and look back at the practice and the progress of these students? So Kristen Inglis, thank you so much for being here today. I am confident you have a web page within the Wesleyan web page. So if somebody wanted to learn more about you, they don't have to say www. That's passe. But what do they say on their Google search bar?
You can just Google Wesleyan CPE or Wesleyan Center for Prison Education.
Good. And of course, anybody who wants to know more about Middlesex Community College can find us on the World Wide Web at MxCC.edu. This is Anna Wasesha, President of Middlesex Community College, wishing you all a very good day.